Greetings from Movie Recap Shorts again. This time, I'll be explaining the 2012 short film The Secret Number. Dershman, a well-known psychiatrist who worked in a mental hospital. As he reflects on the past, it becomes clear that the young child from the opening scene was none other than him. Despite surviving the vehicle accident, Dr. Simon was severely traumatized. He can still clearly recall it. He is accompanied in this introduction by Professor Ursheim, a bright mathematician and one of his patients. He can be seen writing intently on the board. Professor Ursheim passes the board to Dr. Simon after finishing his writing, remarking that it is useless. It is evident that he has scribbled the digits 1 through 9 multiple times. Dr. Simon gives it a quick look and remarks on how excellent his patient's work is. Then he asks the professor if he thinks it's not right. Professor Ursheim remarks angrily that it is incorrect since the secret number bleem is absent. Here we learn that although the professor discusses this mysterious number frequently, he is unable to provide evidence for its existence. He only responds, "You have to trust him, he's a mathematician, not a crazy person." Later on, Dr. Simon is studying Professor Ursheim's past in great detail at home. He is shocked to learn that, despite receiving multiple mathematician prizes, the professor is no ordinary mathematician. In the mathematical community, the Fields Medal is the equal of the Nobel Prize, and he has even won it. Dr. Simon discovers after more investigation that the professor never had emotional trauma or mental illness. This raises concerns such as whether the professor was indeed unstable or if his findings put someone in danger. Dr. Simon and Professor Ursheim are talking about the mystery number again the following day. The lecturer eventually discloses that there is a number bleem between the normal numbers 3 and 4. Counting would therefore be 1, 2, 3, bleem, 4, 5, and so forth. Dr. Simon stands up and begs the professor to prove the supernatural notion since he is sick of hearing it repeated. He gives him instructions to remove a certain number of jelly beans from a jar in order to demonstrate the number's existence. Professor Ursheim tries to organize the beans at first, feeling confident that he can complete the assignment. After some effort, he is unable to align a bleem number of them, so he loses his temper and tosses everything. The professor is then taunted by Dr. Simon, who claims that he cannot prove it because there is no such number. But a furious professor strikes back, saying that he can't prove anything because there was an outside force stopping him. Then, Dr. Simon refutes his assertions, stating that he was with him the entire time and that nobody was present to stop him. Following their tense exchange, the professor asked Dr. Simon for a pencil and paper so he could carry out his research, but Dr. Simon just ended the meeting by claiming he would give the writing supplies some thought later. At that moment, the professor spots the black marker on the ground close to where the jelly beans are dispersed. When the security guard gets there, Professor Ursheim approaches the marking and covers it up. Dr. Simon is perplexed as the professor crazily shoves a load of jelly beans in his mouth before being led away to his room. After that, he is taken from there and placed in room 304, which is heavily secured and under observation. Meanwhile, Dr. Simon is reminded of the disaster once more by the jelly beans that are all over the floor. That day, a young Dr. Simon picked up the same jelly bean from the road after the police arrived to take the dead body. The man who was murdered by his car after it struck him dropped it. After a difficult day at work, Dr. Simon is getting ready to head home in the following scene. It takes him an exceptionally long time to go from the 4th floor to the 3rd as he descends the elevator. He becomes perplexed by this and begins to doubt the veracity of the mystery number bleem. After the bizarre elevator incident, Dr. Simon begins to investigate the enigmatic number further. He learns that Professor Ursheim's outburst at a meeting was the real reason for his imprisonment. He then begins to listen to multiple recordings of his talks with the professor after that. Professor Ursheim asserts in one of the interviews that the universe's fundamental fabric is the number bleem. He adds that although the galaxy is made up of multiple dimensions, the normal person cannot see them. He claims that inadequate mathematical understanding is the primary barrier to the exploration of other dimensions. He goes on to say that humans can visit and explore other realms if the mystery number bleem is found. Humans will be able to communicate faster than light and travel through time once the number bleem is discovered. Dr. Simon is staring at the tapes intently when he discovers an ant on his desk. He carefully picks it up with a piece of paper and securely tosses it out the window, being the good person that he is. The following scene finds a weary Dr. Simon enjoying some drinks at a bar. He is taking a moment to unwind since he is tired of all that has been going on around him recently. One of the peanuts he is breaking open suddenly moves and splits apart by itself without the need for any outside assistance. The doctor is startled by the paranormal experience right away, but before he can collect himself, he notices Professor Ursheim scrawling some arithmetic problems on the bar's window. Without delay, he stands up and moves to pursue the professor. Following some pursuit, Dr. Simon arrives at a quiet lane. He discovers a television showing news about the very incident from his youth as he continues to stroll. The elderly guy struck by the car has not been identified in the 3 days following the tragedy, according to the news. Then he sees a younger version of himself watching the strange news. As it happens, the doctor was only dreaming, and a phone call wakes him up. It is there that he learns Professor Ursheim has vanished from his chamber. So perhaps there was some truth to his dream after all. The physician then makes his way right away to the mental health facility. A worker by the name of Jean answers the phone and says they are going to start a second search to find the professor. Additionally, he emphasizes that the professor was in the room during bed check and that he had not allowed anybody else to enter. One may now wonder how an elderly and frail man like the professor managed to get out of a place that was so heavily secured. Dr. Simon finds this equally confusing. When the two go to investigate in room number 304, they are shocked to see formal writing and mathematical formulae all over the walls. It appears that the professor used the marker to conduct study all through the night. Following his examination, the doctor discovers 3 jelly beans on the table that resemble the ones in his room. In addition, he discovers the marker cap on the ground, which brings back memories of his early mishap. He picked up a black marker in the flashback that was missing its cap. Suddenly, he realizes what has happened and recalls everything. Jean takes one of the beans from the table while Dr. Simon is preoccupied trying to understand the circumstances. Dr. Simon doesn't want him to touch it, but he throws it into the air and swallows it. Dr. Simon observes 3 jelly beans on the table despite everyone appearing to have eaten nothing. Then he vividly recalls the accident he had as a child. We see the accident scene once more as the film comes to a close. The man's face is eventually revealed when jelly beans are strewn all over the road. It's none other than Professor Ursheim. Let me now clarify for those of you who are still perplexed. The primary character of this film, Dr. Ursheim, is a time traveler, and the plot revolves around time travel. He was deemed unstable and was imprisoned in a mental facility, but in reality, he was a genius who understood things that no other person could have imagined. His long-held hypothesis of the Bleem's secret number proved accurate, and his theories on time travel were also accurate. He was made fun of by everyone for being unable to validate his theory while being imprisoned in a cell without access to resources for further study. But once he had the black marker in his possession, he applied all of his mathematical knowledge to find Bleem. He employed Bleem, the focal point of time travel, to travel between several eras. This time, he traveled back in time to Dr. Simon's past, when his car tragically struck and killed him. He was able to go through time, but he broke one rule.